They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine frozen solid, with a side of financial ruin that would make Gordon Gekko weep. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I did when they pushed me too far. When my husband's mistress thought she could silence me with lawyers and threats, I wrote a check for $1 million to her divorce attorney. But that was just the appetizer. The main course. Destroying my own daughter's inheritance to prove that blood means nothing when betrayal runs this deep. If you're settling in for this story, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you're going to want to follow along for every twisted turn of what happened next. I used to be someone. Margaret Elizabeth Thornfield, wife of Senator Richard Thornfield, mother to Sarah Elizabeth, philanthropist, committee chair of the country club's most exclusive charity gala. I lived in a house with 14 rooms that I decorated twice a year, drove a Mercedes that smelled perpetually of Italian leather and my Chanel perfume, and never once questioned whether I deserved any of it. That woman feels like a stranger now, a fool in designer clothes who mistook proximity to power for having power herself. For 23 years, I played the perfect wife. I smiled at campaign dinners where men twice my age would pat my shoulder and tell Richard how lucky he was, while their eyes lingered too long on my neckline. I hosted dinner parties for 200 people, remembering every spouse's name, every dietary restriction, every anniversary and birthday that might matter for Richard's political future. I raised Sarah to be the kind of daughter who would photograph well at campaign events. Polished, articulate, just rebellious enough to seem authentic, but never enough to cause real trouble. The irony is that I was good at it. Exceptionally good. I could work a room like a chess master, identifying the power players, the gossip sources, the potential donors who needed just the right kind of attention to open their wallets. Richard's mother, that withered old bat Helena, never appreciated what I brought to the family. She'd make these cutting little comments about my background, how I'd grown up in a middle-class suburb instead of old money, how my father sold insurance instead of inheriting railroad fortunes. She'd smile that icy smile and suggest, "You might want to learn more about our families." Philanthropic traditions, as if I hadn't already, tripled their charitable donations through my connections. But I endured it all because I believed in the fairy tale. The senator's wife, the beautiful home, the respect that came with the Thornfield name. I thought I was building something permanent, something that would last. I thought Sarah would inherit not just money, but status, connections, a life of ease and influence. I sacrificed everything to maintain that illusion, my own ambitions, my friendships, even my relationship with my parents, who died thinking their daughter had become too important to visit them more than twice a year. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the sunroom, reviewing seating charts for the annual Children's Hospital benefit, when Richard's phone rang on the kitchen counter where he'd forgotten it. The caller ID said, "Victoria Chen, attorney at law." I almost didn't answer. I had enough lawyers in my life already, but something about the urgency of the repeated calling made me pick up Mrs. Thornfield. The voice was crisp, professional, with just enough warmth to be disarming. "This is Victoria Chun. I represent Amanda Walsh in her divorce proceedings. I believe your husband knows my client quite well." Amanda Walsh. The name hit me like a physical blow. Richard's campaign coordinator. The 30-something brunette with the sharp suits and sharper smile who'd been working late nights with my husband for the past 8 months. I'd suspected, of course. The mysterious phone calls, the weekend strategy sessions, the way he'd started showering immediately when he came home instead of kissing me hello first. But suspecting and knowing are different creatures entirely. "I don't know what you're implying," I managed, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Senora Thornfield, I'm calling as a courtesy. My client is prepared to go public with evidence of her relationship with the senator unless certain financial arrangements are made. I thought you might want to discuss this privately before things become messy." The blackmail was almost quaint in its directness. Amanda wanted $2 million to disappear quietly, to take a job in another state and never speak about her affair with Richard. Victoria Chun made it sound so reasonable, so civilized. Just a simple transaction to preserve everyone's reputation in marriages. That's when I learned the first devastating truth. Richard had already emptied our joint accounts to pay her. $2 million gone. Not who's gone transferred to a woman who'd been sleeping with my husband while I planned dinner parties and smiled for campaign photographs. But the money was just the beginning of my humiliation. When I confronted Richard that evening, he didn't even have the decency to deny it. "Margaret, you have to understand," he said, loosening his tie like he was preparing for a business negotiation instead of discussing the destruction of our marriage. "Amanda threatened to go to the press. The election is in 18 months. I couldn't let her destroy everything we've built. Everything we've built. As if I'd been some silent partner instead of the architect of his political success. As if my connections, my fundraising, my careful cultivation of relationships hadn't been essential to his career. He spoke about paying off his mistress like it was a campaign expense. Necessary and slightly distasteful, but ultimately justified. What about what she's destroying right now? I asked. What about our marriage? What about Sarah? He had the audacity to look annoyed. Sarah will be fine. She's young. She adapt. And our marriage is rugged. Margaret, we've been married for 23 years. We both know this has been more of a partnership than a romance for a long time. A partnership? As if love was just another political alliance that had outlived its usefulness. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of lawyers, accountants, and increasingly desperate phone calls. Richard had mortgaged our house to cover the blackmail payment. Our investment accounts were frozen pending the divorce proceedings. The woman I'd been the one who bought fresh flowers every Monday and never looked at price tags couldn't afford to keep her manicure appointments. But the real knife in the back came from Sarah, my daughter. My beautiful, brilliant daughter who I'd raised to be strong and independent. Took her father's side without hesitation. When I called her at Georgetown Law School, sobbing and desperate for some comfort, some validation that I wasn't losing my mind, she listened with the cold professionalism she'd inherited from Richard's mom. "I understand you're upset," she said, her voice carrying that careful tone people use with unstable relatives. "But Dad did what he had to do. The family name matters more than your hurt feelings." The family name. Not my feelings, not our relationship, not the 23 years I'd devoted to building the life she was now so eager to protect. She talked about reputation and political futures and long-term thinking, as if I was some hysterical child who couldn't understand complex adult decisions. Sarah, she was blackmailing him. Doesn't that matter to you? Mom, political wives have dealt with mistresses for centuries. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. My own daughter thought my devastation at discovering my husband's affair and financial betrayal was theatrical nonsense. She'd absorbed all the privilege I'd helped create for her, and none of the loyalty I'd hoped to earn. The final straw came 3 months later at Helena's funeral. Richard's mother had finally succumbed to the cancer she'd been fighting with characteristic stubbornness, and I thought perhaps the shared grief might create some space for reconciliation. I was wrong. At the reception after the service, I overheard Sarah talking to her cousin Michael about the inheritance. Helena had left everything the family estate, the investments, the trust fund stube divided between Richard and his brother James. But there was a codicil, apparently. Something about distributing the assets based on family stability and moral character. "Don't worry," Sarah was saying, her voice carrying across the crowded living room where I stood frozen behind a potted palm. "The lawyers think Dad's situation with Amanda is actually helping his case. It shows he's willing to make hard decisions to protect the family reputation. Mom's the one who looks unstable, all that crying and dramatics. Grandmother never liked her anyway. My own daughter was using my emotional breakdown as evidence against me in a legal proceeding I didn't even know existed. She was leveraging my grief and humiliation to help her father secure an inheritance that would make the blackmail money seem like pocket change. That night, alone in the guest room of what used to be my house, I made a decision that would consume the next 2 years of my life. If they wanted to play legal games, I would show them what a real game looked like. Before I continue this story, I want to hear from all of you watching. Comment below and tell me where you're watching, from what city, what country. I want to know that this story is reaching people who understand what it means to be betrayed by the ones you loathe most. I started by hiring private investigators. Not the sleazy, cigarette-smoking types you see in movies, but former FBI agents and forensic accountants who cost more per day than I used to spend on groceries in a month. What I discovered about my family's finances made the affair look like a minor indiscretion. Richard hadn't just mortgaged our house to pay off. Amanda, he'd been embezzling from campaign funds for years. Small amounts at first. Money that could be explained as accounting errors or legitimate expenses. But over time it had grown into a sophisticated scheme involving shell companies, fake consulting contracts, and overseas accounts that would make a drug cartel jealous. The beautiful part was that Sarah knew my law student daughter, with her perfect GPA and her internship at a Y2 firm, had helped him set up some of the financial structures. She'd used her legal research skills to find loopholes and her family connections to open doors that should have stayed closed. My own daughter was complicit in her father's crimes, and she'd been planning to use the evidence of my emotional instability to keep me from discovering the truth. That's when I met Victoria Chun in person. I'd expected to hate her. She was, after all, the lawyer who'd helped Richard's mistress blackmail my family. But when I walked into her downtown office with a briefcase full of financial documents and a proposal that would make her the richest divorce attorney in the state, I found myself face to face with a woman who understood exactly what I wanted. Total annihilation. Victoria was younger than me, probably Sarah's age, with the kind of sharp intelligence that cut through pretense like a surgeon's scalpel. Her office was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate, and it worked. But what struck me most was her honesty about what we were both doing. "Mrs. Thornfield," she said, reviewing my evidence with the focused intensity of a predator studying prey, "what you're proposing isn't just a divorce case. This is warfare. If we pursue this strategy, there will be no reconciliation with your family. No possibility of forgiveness or repair. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Sarah's voice at the funeral, dismissing my pain as dramatics. I thought about Richard's casual shrug when he'd called our marriage a partnership. I thought about Helena's years of subtle contempt, and how even in death, she was trying to punish me for not being born into the right family. I want to destroy them. Primera sa, y simply all of them. I want Sarah to understand what it feels like to lose everything she thinks she's entitled to. I want Richard to see his political career disappear. I want everyone who ever looked down on me to know that I was the one who had the power all along. Victoria smiled not, the warm, professional smile she'd given me on the phone, but something colder and more genuine. "Then, let's write that check." The $1 million retainer I paid Victoria was just the beginning. Over the next 18 months, I would spend nearly everything I had left on a legal campaign designed not just to win a divorce settlement, but to expose every lie, every crime, every moment of casual cruelty my family had inflicted on me over the years. We started with the embezzlement. Victoria's team traced every illegal transaction, every false invoice, every penny Richard had stolen from campaign donors who'd trusted him with their money. But we didn't immediately turn the evidence over to prosecutors. Instead, we used it as leverage to freeze all family assets pending a full forensic accounting. The house gone into receivership. The investment accounts locked pending criminal investigation. Richard's Senate salary garnished for restitution to defrauded campaign contributors. Within 6 months. The family that had once lived in 14-room mansions was fighting over who would pay for Sarah's law school tuition. But the real masterpiece was the inheritance case. Using Helena's own words about moral character, Victoria argued that Richard's crimes and Sarah's complicity made them unfit to receive the family trust. We had documentation of every illegal transaction, recordings of phone calls where they'd discussed hiding assets from me, evidence that they'd been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent to prevent me from claiming my share of marital property. The irony was exquisite. Helena had written that codicil to keep me from inheriting anything, but her own obsession with family reputation became the weapon I used to destroy the people she'd wanted to protect. A court battle stretched across 2 years and 3 separate jurisdictions. Richard's political career imploded when the embezzlement charges became public. Sarah was expelled from law school for academic dishonesty. She'd been using campaign funds to pay for tutors and test preparation services, all while maintaining her scholarship based on false financial need statements. I watched it all unfold from the gallery of various courtrooms, dressed in the same severe black suits I'd worn to Helena's funeral, taking notes in a leather portfolio that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The same people who'd once competed for invitations to my dinner parties now crossed the street to avoid acknowledging me. I'd become the cautionary tale they told at country club lunches, the political wife who'd gone nuclear rather than accept her fate gracefully. The final court date was on a Thursday in November, almost exactly 2 years after Victoria's first phone call. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who looked like she'd spent her career cleaning up the messes of entitled families, read the verdict with the emotionless precision of a death certificate. Richard, guilty of embezzlement, sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, disbarred, banned from holding public office, all assets forfeited for restitution. Sarah. Academic fraud, conspiracy to commit embezzlement, complicity in financial crimes. Expelled from law school, banned from taking the bar exam in any state. 5 years probation. The Helena Thornfield Trust dissolved, with all assets awarded to the sole surviving family member with clean hands and moral character named me. I walked out of that courthouse owning everything Helena had spent her life accumulating. The estate, the investments, the art collection, the jewelry that had been passed down through 4 generations of Thornfield women. All of it legally and irrevocably mine. Victoria was waiting for me on the courthouse steps, her own victory almost as complete as mine. She'd built her reputation on this case, used our ward to launch herself into the upper echelon of family law attorneys. We'd both gotten exactly what we wanted. "How does it feel?" she asked, as we watched Richard and Sarah emerge from the courthouse with their court-appointed lawyers, looking like refugees from their own lives. I considered the question seriously. How did it feel to have won so completely that there was nothing left to fight for? How did it feel to own everything I'd once only been allowed to borrow? "Empty," I said, and realized I was telling the truth. That was 6 months ago. I'm living in Helena's estate now, rattling around in 22 rooms that echo with the ghosts of people who despised me. The same maids who once looked through me now address me as madam, with a kind of obsequious respect reserved for people who sign their paychecks. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and absolutely no one to spend it with. Richard writes me letters from federal prison. They arrive every few weeks, always handwritten on prison stationery, full of apologies and explanations and promises about the man he's becoming behind bars. I don't read them anymore. I've hired someone to file them chronologically in case they become relevant for future legal proceedings. But the Richard who once shared my bed in my dreams died in that courthouse 2 years ago. Sarah tried to visit me once, about 3 months after the final verdict. She'd lost weight, lost the confidence that used to armor her against the world's inconveniences. She sat in Helena's formal living room, my formal living room now, and cried the kind of ugly, desperate tears I'd once shed in that guest bedroom. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out in jagged sobs. I was wrong about everything. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt you in ways I can't even understand. Please, can we find a way to fix this? I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, broken daughter who'd chosen her father's crimes over her mother's love and felt something that might have been pity. But pity isn't the same as forgiveness, and forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Sarah, I said, my voice as steady as Helena's had been when she delivered her own cutting judgments. You made your choice 2 years ago. You decided that family loyalty meant protecting criminals rather than supporting the victim of their crimes. You used my grief as evidence against me in legal proceedings designed to steal my future. You are your father's daughter in every way that matters. She left that day understanding, perhaps for the first time, that some choices have consequences that outlast regret. I spend my days now managing the fortune I destroyed my family to inherit. I sit on boards of charities that once rejected my membership applications. I write checks to causes I don't care about and attend galas where people smile at me with the same mixture of fear and fascination they might reserve for a natural disaster survivor. Sometimes, late at night in Helena study my study now, I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently, if I'd accepted the affair with dignity, negotiated a quiet divorce, maintained some relationship with Sarah even after discovering her betrayal. I could have been the gracious ex-wife who rebuilt her life with class and found some version of happiness. That didn't require destroying everyone who'd ever hurt me. But that version of myself seems as foreign now as the woman who once worried about flower arrangements and seating charts. I am what they made me, a cautionary tale about the price of betrayal, a woman who chose to burn down the world rather than accept her place in it. The terrible truth is that I don't regret it. Not the money I spent on revenge, not the relationships I destroyed, not the isolation that surrounds me now like an expensive self-imposed exile. I regret the years I wasted believing in fairy tales about loyal families and happy endings. I regret the trust I gave to people who saw my love as weakness and my loyalty as foolishness. But I don't regret showing them who they were dealing with when they pushed too far. Victory, I've learned, tastes exactly like loneliness. But loneliness is a price I can afford, and justice even the cold. Calculated version, I served as a luxury that money can't buy, but power can deliver. I am Margaret Elizabeth Thornfield, heir to everything the Thornfield family built over for generations. I am also the woman who destroyed that same family to prove that betrayal has a price that compounds with interest, until it consumes everything you thought you owned. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine frozen solid, and I've been dining on it ever since. If this story has shown you anything about the price of betrayal and the power of refusing to accept it, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because sometimes the most important lesson isn't about forgiveness. It's about what happens when someone finally decides they've had enough.